Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. You have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so pleased you are here. It is Tuesday. It is 3 p.m. on a special edition of Crime Time because we have a very special author and a very special book for you today, and we do not want you to miss this. I'm your host of Crime Time, USA Today bestselling author Hank Phillippi Ryan, the author of 15 novels of suspense. The 15th one wrong word, is now in production, and I cannot wait for you to read it. It's sort of Suits meets Scandal, greed, gossip, and revenge, just like all of our everyday lives. But that's not what we're about today. Today we are welcoming MP Woodward, Mike Woodward, whose new book, Dead Drop, will have you turning the pages as fast as you possibly can. It is a terrific beach read. It is immersive and propulsive and unputdownable, as they say, and absolutely a perfect Father's Day gift. If you have a dad or a husband or a brother or an uncle or somebody who loves spy thrillers, international intrigue, they will absolutely love Dead Drop by Mike Woodward. Let me tell you very, very quickly one terrific blurb from The Big Thrill. Woodward is a veteran of U.S. intelligence, and it's obvious because of the knowledgeable and believable scenarios he writes for his characters. The Big Thrill says, I haven't seen the same confidence, skill, and ability in spy novels since Robert Ludlum. And I want to welcome you, Mike, today. Robert Ludlum, back in the day, I remember reading the Scarlatti Inheritance and the Osterman Weekend and what the Rhineman Exchange, something like that. Did you read those seminal Ludlum books?
Oh, you bet I did. Yeah. I remember reading the Osterman Weekend in particular, and they made that, I think, a pretty bad movie with Morgan Fairchild, if I remember correctly. And my favorite was probably The Bourne Identity, the one that obviously kicked off and made him very, very famous.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, though, because to be compared to Robert Ludlum has got to, when you read that, what do you think? I mean, that's sort of the pinnacle.
Oh, I was obviously, I love that. I love being compared to guys like that. And I would say that I've been informed in my writing largely by guys like that because I grew up during the Cold War and served in the military really just right at the end of the Cold War and just the beginning of the post-Cold War period. So throughout that, popular literature was John le Carré and Tom Clancy, Ludlum, guys, Ken Follett, guys like that.
I mean, I remember how pivotal it was. I remember very well reading Hunt for Red October. And all of the Ken Follett books, of course, were. Did he ever tell you that he wrote his first book? He started writing his first book because he needed money to fix his car. He needed 750 pounds, or I don't even know how much that is, to fix his car. And he thought, well, one of my friends writes books. I should write a book and see if I can fix my car. And that seemed to work.
Wasn't Eye of the Needle his first book?
Yeah, and that's how he got money for his to fix his car.
So, and it's funny because it's one of my favorites. I think because it's such a tight story.
And speaking of bad movies, that was a really good movie.
Yes.
With Donald Sutherland.
Donald Sutherland was in it. Yep, that's right.
Very, very surprising. And you're having a lot of fans here. Pamela Fry-Priest says, "Ooh, okay, you just said the magic author Ludlum was great," and that is marvelous. Speaking of blurbs, though, there's another one on the back of this book, which lets us introduce this book. Dead Drop says, it is a true privilege to read a new literary superstar's debut effort. This is about your first book in the Handler series. The Handler, says Dean Koontz. Stephen Koontz, sorry. Stephen Koontz. The other Koontz says Stephen Koontz. Unmatched authenticity, great characters, a dazzling plot. I was mesmerized. Trust me, you'll be too. Stephen Koontz, author of Flight of the Intruder, said about your first book and the first of the Handler series. Talk about blurbs. What about that?
Yeah, well, Stephen Koontz was a special guy to me because I had read Flight of the Intruder when I was in training for the Navy. It was really popular with all the Navy guys, so he became instantly famous. And I ended up serving in the same unit as him, but 30 or 40 years later. And when I had this book and my editor was collecting blurbs, I thought, well, I wonder if Stephen Kuntz would give me a blurb. I don't even know if he's still writing, but I found his email online and contacted him and said, hey, I was in same unit. And he said, sure, I'll read your book. And so he made me send it hard copy, which is super painful. Wasted a whole cartridge of laser ink, but I sent it to him, and about a week later, he called. He actually called me and was so excited about the book. And he continues to be a sort of a mentor and helper. And I'm going down to Scottsdale to Poison Pen, which I'm sure you've been to, Hank. So I'm going down there next week, and I'll hopefully visit with Stephen.
That is so exciting. And Susie Sharp, look at this, says, wow, if Stephen Kuntz says this man is a great author, I can't wait to get my hands on this book. And the new book is Dead Drop by Mike Woodward, MP Woodward, which came out on May 23rd. So you can get it now for a wonderful Father's Day present, and you can sneak read it first. That might be a really great idea. Let me tell you quickly, if you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. You have picked a marvelous day to come. I see Renee is here and Susie Sharp is here. And so, oh, look at this. Sherry is here and Pamela Fry-Priest is here. Mary Garrett says, already on the edge of my seat. And Shannon Chanson. Everybody is here today. Hi, says Renee from Southeast Florida. And we welcome you to Crime Time today. If you are new to Crime Time, that's fantastic. Let me tell you that it was started at the beginning of the pandemic, which is how long ago, crazy long ago now, by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us discovering new books, to keep us reading, to keep us all connected with each other. And we, thanks to you, are still going strong. And today we have a marvelous author, Mike Woodward, MP Woodward. And let me tell you a little bit about him right now. I'm going to read the formal bio so you guys know who he is. MP Woodward is a veteran of both U.S. intelligence ops and the entertainment industry. We should talk about that. As a naval intelligence officer with the U.S. Pacific Command, he scripted scenario moves and counter moves for U.S. war game exercises in the Middle East. In multiple deployments to the Persian Gulf and Far East, he worked alongside U.S. Special Forces, CIA, and NSA. Woodward has also run international distribution marketing for Amazon Prime Video, having launched Amazon's original video content in more than 40 countries. And this is his brand new book, Dead Drop, which it's a sequel to The Handler, but it can easily and happily be read as a standalone. Would you agree? And what was it like to write that?
It is a sequel to The Handler, and there is the same world of characters. However, it's an entirely new drama, a new problem set, a new geopolitical problem. And this is the first time I've ever written a sequel. And so I would say that I didn't necessarily know how much I was supposed to explain to my readers of what had happened before. But my editor, basically, I asked him, and he said, not much, right? Like just enough to say, like, here's why this guy, comes into the story. But it's really, really boring to read a rehash of some other book. Let them buy the other book was more or less his advice. And so I tried really hard to write this as a standalone, knowing that a lot of people would pick it up that way.
And you see Kathleen says new, and welcome, Kathleen. Hi, and can't wait to read The Handler and Dead Drop. Sounds so authentic given his background. And yes, perfect, Kathleen. We will talk about that. And I do, Michael, want to talk to you about power and action and emotion and suspense and stakes. But first, just tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so probably everybody watching this has heard plenty about Iran. And does Iran, are they going to have a nuclear weapon? Have they enriched uranium? And what can we do to prevent it? In Dead Drop, I'm envisioning a world where Iran has enriched uranium and is capable of doing a nuclear weapon. So the ship has sort of sailed, mm-hmm. But then there's a difference of opinion geopolitically between the Americans and the Israelis, where the Americans take the attitude that they can contain the Iranian threat by working out a new diplomatic deal. And so they don't want to hear of any trouble. The Israelis, of course, are much more aggressive. And so everything changes when an Israeli submarine finds an unexploded missile that appears to have been launched by Hezbollah and modified by Hezbollah, which is an Iranian client terrorist organization in Lebanon. And so Israel looks at this as an existential threat. They, all the king's horses and men chase down, hey, this is bad, bad, bad. The Americans are sort of trying to downplay it. And so the spies from these three countries all get caught in the middle. And you have an Iranian group, an Israeli group, and an American group, and they're all struggling to find the truth. And all three of them have it a little bit wrong. And then alliances shift as the story goes on.
I love all of them have it a little bit wrong. And I'm interested in your description of the book because there's another way of describing it as well, which is a real relationship story between two smart, powerful people, each of whom really want something. And your book, we're talking about Dead Drop by MP Woodward. The book is very personal. You're such a genius at balance, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. But the center, the beating heart of the book is these two people who are the main characters. And we grow to really relate to them and root for them. Talk a little bit about those two main characters.
Yeah, you bet. So the protagonist there's really two protagonists, and they are a divorced couple. And I wanted to portray a mature adult relationship between a man and a woman that had a lot of history, a lot of passion, and a lot of conflict. And so they share a daughter. They obviously still have feelings for each other, but given the difficulty of both being CIA people in different kinds of roles and having different personalities, that tension in their marriage ultimately drove them apart. So they still care about each other, but they tend to see the world differently.
I mean, and that's one of the many things that makes your book fascinating, I think, is that we're looking at it on this very global, super high stakes level, what this chess game that's unfolding. And we're also looking at it on a very personal level. It takes us into this adventure in a way that just a book that's about generic spies would never do that.
This is something that I set out to do from the beginning. When I was an intelligence officer myself, one of my takeaways from that was that comparing that to, say, the corporate world, I went on to a long tech career. There are a lot of similarities in that you get things done with relationships. And so one of the things I dislike in a lot of thrillers is when the agencies are all knowing and perfect. They're also monolithic, faceless sort of buildings and antenna, and that's it, right? And in my experience, that it's not like that at all. It's people, and it's people analyzing things and debating things and trying to do their best. And so I wanted to portray that aspect, and I also wanted the people that I had to have problems of regular people. Meredith, who is really the main character of this book, a woman, she's a single mom, and she's dealing with, how much can I tell my daughter? She's a little bit jealous of the relationship that her husband has with her daughter, and really things that in some ways are very human that we can all identify, even though she's facing down this kind of big thing. So I wanted it to be about ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Yes, but she is ordinary and extraordinary. I mean, Meredith, when we meet her, is just so relatable, and I loved her instantly. And I loved how you got her voice, her inner dialogue, her inner monologue with herself, and how she switches from being sort of single woman having dinner to on the job. Talk a little bit about how you download, if you do, or how you speak how you be Meredith.
Well, first off, thanks for that comment. That's one, I treasure it, believe me. Meredith was born for me in my observation of women at work. I have worked with a number of really, really sharp, driven, professional women, and I used to like to observe how the challenges that they had in operating in male dominated places like the military and the intelligence services, and then later, frankly, in tech. And I saw a number of them navigate it very, very successfully. And I loved the idea that there was often this conflict of having a really, really busy personal life, generally because they end up still taking care of the kids, even though, in our modern society, that's not necessarily how things ought to be or whatever, but that emotional attachment is there. And then balancing that with career. I also wanted to sort of pay tribute that they don't, the women that I've worked with that were really successful, they weren't masculine. They were still women, and they used their femininity to great advantage. And so it was sort of like, let's see it where it's both sides of things. And so Meredith really represented to me one of the tough driven women that I worked with. And so I drew on probably 3 or 4 that I knew to really create that character.
Well, she's great. I mean, and not only that, but she has a heart. She has passion. She doesn't exactly always know what she wants for herself, but she does know what she wants for her profession. And that's really a wonderful balance. And then talk about her counterpart, her ex-husband, and where he came from.
Yeah. So her ex-husband's name is John. So his name is John Dale. And he's a guy that was in the service, got recruited by the CIA because his mother was an Iranian refugee and he spoke Farsi and he was strong physically and everything. And when he was recruited, Meredith was actually his first boss. And so that is how they got to know each other. That's how they fell in love. Meredith got pregnant, so they have a daughter. They married young. And John is much less of the analyst than Meredith is, and is more of a, let's just cut to the chase and action beats words kind of a guy. And so that they have an inherent conflict in their relationship in that John plays checkers while Meredith plays chess. And I think the conflict in Meredith's character is that she thinks she doesn't need someone else in her life. She thinks that she can handle everything all the time, just fine. But she and John are better, when they're working together. And she kind of fights against that because she doesn't want to admit it, but it ends up being a truism.
And it's such a good story. Have you seen relationships like this in your career when the husband and wife are both in the same career?
I have. I've seen it in the military. I wouldn't say that I've seen it to this degree of a conflict, but of course, it's boring if everybody's just getting along fine. I have a relative who was in the clandestine service in the CIA, and one of the things that person told me was that there are quite a few people that marry each other because it's a cloistered environment. And they're also very young and oftentimes very good looking. The CIA recruits a lot of people, who are particularly women who look good and can get into those roles. And so when I started hearing about this, I started thinking about like, wow, that could be really interesting. They're also kind of famously, CIA officers have a very high rate of divorce. And this relative of mine told me that sure enough, those marriages happen, but then the strain is very difficult, and they do their best to co-locate couples. And I have that being part of the book too. And I knew this from the military. When you're married to a spouse, the military will try really hard to say, okay, you can be on a shore tour in the same area that your wife is, and she can do the sea tour. And then next time it's flip-flop so that somebody's still at home. And so I set that up with this couple, but I wanted to make sure that didn't always leave them feeling like it was fair.
And it's interesting because I want you to look, if you have a second, when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments and you're having so much applause and so much affection coming through from the people who are saying, wow, this is great, great, great. We love this book. And I want to remind you all in the audience to leave a question or leave a comment, because we will be drawing for a winner for Dead Drop. We will spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show. So one of you lucky winners will not have to buy this book. The rest of you run right out not right now, not right now, but after the show, run out and get this book for yourself or your dad or someone wonderful in your family. It's a perfect summer, very immersive beach read. You will not be able to put it down. One of the things that also, and the more you enter, the more possibilities you have of winning. So what can I say? Do that. Anyway, the other thing about having a husband, wife in the same service is that everybody has a secret. And you have to decide when to tell the secret, or if you can tell the secret, or how the secret will affect your behavior and what the other person thinks about that behavior. Talk a little bit about secrets in this book as well. I mean, let me say really quickly, you are so subtle about secrets in this novel. One of the things that you juggle so brilliantly in Dead Drop is so many things are under the surface. There's so much subtext. It's gorgeous. Things that are planted early in the book blossom as the book develops. So talk a little bit about that, how much you know going in, and how much fun it must be to leave those breadcrumbs for people.
Yeah. What I learned in writing, really, I picked up on this when I was an executive at Amazon, and I was in Prime Video. And I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I tried to write stuff. And I could write out what happened. I could write out dialogue, but I realized that what I was missing was the presentation of what is happening. And so when I thought about that, I looked at screenplays. And when you look at, we're now in this world of streaming video, I think it's flat out changed consumer behavior and reader behavior, where people expect an arc. They expect to want to kind of figure things out along the way, and there's a delight in doing that. And I think people like it when things tidy up. Like if you're presenting stuff in the beginning, and there should be a reason you're presenting that. So I thought a lot about that as I started to write, and I had multiple perspectives. And one of the things I always wanted to do was to say, everybody has a perspective, and the reader can see what that guy's or woman's perspective is, but the reader can also see the flaw in their thinking, because the reader knows just a little bit more. They don't know everything, but they know a little bit more. So that was something that I tried to create with, it's a secret on one side, it's not a secret on another side. But I also tried to do that, which I think you started your question at alluding to. That's also true in the central relationship of the marriage, in that they've had to keep secrets from each other. And then that blends together of, well, how much of that is about our relationship versus a professional secret? And it gets very, very blurry and messy on that.
I'm just sitting here nodding as you see like this bobblehead, agreeing with everything you say. And I agree that question was just a little bit twisty. But I mean, you have to juggle again, and we're talking about the book Dead Drop by MP Woodward, which is just out. You have to juggle a big high stakes worldview story with the personal story. And you keep the threads of each one in the air the whole time. How top of mind is it to you to balance the big picture and the little picture? And why is that important?
That is such a good insight and question. When I sat down to do this, I was kind of trained geopolitically, writing war games and stuff, read Tom Clancy and everything. But I do not like books where, the president is a main character and the secretaries, because nobody's been that, right? Okay, Bill Clinton co-wrote a book, right? Yeah, fine, got it. But but by and large, I thought it's very hard. It would be very dry, right? Because I wouldn't know what that's really like. So what I set out to do was to say, there is the context of a big geopolitical problem such that the decisions that all these people make have a major impact on world events. But these are people way down the line that are relatable, right? And so again, it's back to that theme of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And if you can't, it was important to me to create stakes that mattered and to create authenticity that mattered. So that was how I tried to weld together the big geopolitical events down to the personal level. I think it's much more entertaining and lively for it to be people we recognize and characters we root for, as opposed to like the dry, history making figures at the top.
And I love how you've made, and I don't want to give anything away, I love how you make the personal relationships affect the international relationships.
Yeah, and that's something that it's sort of that butterfly effect, right? Where I thought that that would be really interesting, that because two people don't get along, or because two people see things a different way, or their worldview is slightly different, or one guy's very ambitious and therefore ignores inconvenient facts, that actually ends up changing policy from the Iranians or the Americans or the Israelis. And so I tried to have a character from all three of those sides who were making decisions that were not necessarily, sort of in the best interests of what was going on, but also a little bit self-serving.
I love that. And it came through so gorgeously. The other thing that you do, which is such a balance, it's so clear that there's so much knowledgeable detail in this book. And if you just joined us, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking about Dead Drop by MP Woodward. There's so much gorgeous detail, not sort of, doesn't sound like research. It just sounds seamlessly interwoven into the story, from the differences in how someone would recite a prayer in one part of a city and as opposed to another part of a city, how weapons work, how the I don't know, the velocity of an osprey affects the air pressure. And it's gorgeously realistic without sounding like, I did this research and I know this stuff and I'm going to make you listen to it. Talk a little bit about how you make it feel so natural, and how, my final thing, and I know I'm babbling, is how you make the reader feel so smart. We feel like, yeah, we understand those acronyms and we understand those weapons. And you did that. You drew us into this world. Talk a little bit about how you do that.
Hank, I could listen to you all day. Two thoughts for that latter point. I think that the writer should find an elegant way to explain something without sounding like you're explaining it. And as an example, right, you could think, well, I want people to talk about night vision devices, NVDs. Well, if you write NVD, not that many people know what that is. And so then the temptation is to put in parentheses night vision goggles. And it feels like I don't know, it's not elegant. You're talking down to the reader a little bit.
Who's saying that anyway?
Yeah, exactly. And you're interrupting the flow. So it's better to, in the dialogue, say NVD and then have a character respond, I don't think we'll need the goggles, right? And so the reader can say, okay, I get it, right? The NVDs must be night vision goggles. And so I tried to do that everywhere possible. And I learned that through the really the copy editing process of the first book, where a copy editor gets on you, like, hey, you've never mentioned this before. You need to explain it. And you better do that. And I thought, oh, okay, fine. I'm going to find a way to do it, but I'm going to do it my way. I'm not going to put in parens, what this is. And then the other thing that I tried to do, I was very fortunate, I have been very fortunate in my life to have done a lot of different things. So I've flown in these military aircraft. I've been to these countries, et cetera. And so I'm fortunate in having a good memory and being able to kind of think, okay, I remember when I felt like that, and trying to not just write about what it is visually, but how it feels. And that's what I always try to do.
I mean, you were talking about visiting the countries. The settings are so authentic. Have you been everywhere that is in this book?
Everywhere except I confess I haven't been to Beirut. And so a decent amount of the book happens in Beirut. I have been to every other country mentioned. But I interviewed a whole bunch of people from Beirut. And so it's also right. It's so close to Jordan and Israel, which I've been to. So it wasn't hard to get like the climate right and those kinds of things. But within the city, particularly in what's called the Dahia, which is the southern part of Beirut, which is Shia, that's where Hezbollah controls things. I hadn't been there, but I talked to a number of people that have, and that helped, I think, with the authenticity.
And you also make it very clear to someone, if someone is not an expert in international relations or international conflict or international diplomacy, the book is still really fun to read. I mean, you get it completely. If the book were completely fiction, it would be fun. And so you've balanced this idea of taking real possibilities and real scenarios and putting that in the book. But again, giving it the fun of fiction, but still making it be authentic. So when you're writing that, how do you balance, well, I could make that up, or no, let's make this be real? Or does it just sort of come out some way?
Well, as an example, there is a big kind of international congress of the International Atomic Energy Association. And probably most readers have heard of the IAEA and they know that it has something to do with nuclear non-proliferation. But again, all that's very dry. And so instead what I did was I put the reader in the ballroom at this Congress, at a cocktail party, and I made a rather colorful State Department guy who's making sort of snobby observations about everything, and then a character who, it doesn't quite understand why such, certain groups are meeting with each other. And I can let that guy explain it in hopefully a colorful, sort of entertaining, snobby way, just enough that a reader would say, okay, I get it, right? I can picture these guys standing around with their cocktail glasses and sort of competing for attention on who's important and being a little bit jealous over who's talking to, the Deputy Secretary of State, those kinds of things. So again, I try to make it personal, and I often try to relate that back to like, well, when did I feel that way? I was at a big conference, or the CEO, was at a meeting and everybody was getting a little bit sharp elbowed, that kind of stuff. So that's what I try to do.
And we've all felt that way. And that in whatever situation we are, Pamela Fry Priest is saying, I cannot wait to read your books now. Yay. That's my diabolical plan to talk about Dead Drop. And remember, you all ask questions, and I see some coming in. So that's great. We'll go to that in about 2 minutes. But tell us a little bit about the title, as much as you can. What does that really mean? And why did you choose it as the title?
I wanted something to be evocative of an espionage story, because it is an espionage story about spies trying to uncover truths. And when I thought about like, well, what are a bunch of spy terms? Dead Drop really applied. I mean, if you read the book, you would understand why. But much of the action is set off by what is effectively a dummy weapon that Hezbollah fires into the sea, and that the Israelis recover. And it becomes this debate about, is this dummy weapon meant to carry a nuclear warhead or not? We don't know, right? It was a dead drop. And so it's a little bit of a turn of phrase of something that's clearly a synonym for the spy version of that, where you're passing information with a dummy missile.
Yes. I mean, I love it. I thought it was gorgeous. And I also think if you sort of look at it upside down, it's Drop Dead, which is also, I can't get that out of my head because in this novel, the stakes are super high throughout. I mean, this is a razor's edge moment where if something goes wrong, it's going to go spectacularly wrong throughout.
Yeah. And I think that is the trick, is trying to connect the dots between the personal relationships. And every thriller needs to have, I think, pretty high stakes, right? That everybody can feel like, oh no, what if this happens, as well as a timing component to it, sort of a ticking clock. So finding a way to connect those back to the personal lives and creating rootability, I think, for the characters is something I try very hard to do.
I love rootability. That's great.
Yeah.
My final question, and then we'll take questions from the audience, and I see so many fun ones. That's great. Is the movie in the reader's mind just starts instantly with the beginning of this book and does not stop. How do you think cinematically? I mean, you must. And why is that important to you? How do you think about that?
I do think cinematically. To be honest, I again, this comes from my view that 30 years ago, a James Michener, 40 years ago, a James Michener book would come out, and it would be, that thick.
Yeah.
Everybody would go buy it and they would say, have you read the new Michener, right? And then you fast forward, and then Tom Clancy books were really, really thick, and they have all this detail. And I think it's because there wasn't as much competition for the reader's attention, right? Where now any content you want is on, on TV, stories. You can instantly read a book. I see, people are reading books on their phones. They can get it the moment they see it, et cetera. So I started to feel like the novel form was much tighter and more of an arc when it came to entertainment, and really looked a lot more like what I think of as a screenplay. And so I do think of that very cinematically, like, look, if this were the curtain rising in this prologue, how would you instantly make it interesting? Like you have to have blow people away. And the beautiful thing about a novel, unlike a director, your budget is unlimited, right? You do anything you want, right? As long as it makes sense. And so I do try to think about that, and then try to keep pacing appropriate to what feels like a movie. And if you really analyze a movie, you can find a lot of really clever tricks that screenwriters do to show, like, hey, this is advanced 2 weeks, right? It doesn't say 2 weeks later, but you can tell from the dialogue of the main characters that, all right, we've moved along 2 weeks now. Oh, and look at that, the stakes have risen. And that's stuff that I sort of shamelessly try to pick up as a tool in my toolkit.
It's fun too, isn't it?
It is fun. It is a fun intellectual challenge to figure out how to present that, and sort of storyboard it in your head.
And when people say, wow, this is such a page turner, you think, yes, I did it.
Yeah. I think that one is all done. About the fourth draft, I think that up until then, I'm pretty annoyed with myself and think that it could get better. But that's where I think we are our own best editors, and then that final 10% is a separate set of eyes.
Well, I've never heard an author not say that they've had moments when they think, oh my golly, this is never going to work. Who wrote this? And then something happens, maybe 7/8 of the way along the way.
Yeah.
Where you think, oh, that's what this is supposed to be.
I completely, I'm just finishing up my fourth book. And what has happened every time is that you get to that final, it's not quite a full quarter, maybe it's a quarter, that final bit, you have so much momentum and the events and the characters so well that you kind of sit down and write it in a 1 8-hour sitting where you're sort of really bad to your body, but you do it anyway because you're just channeling the story at that point, and you're very confident that, hey, anything that doesn't seem right, I can go back and fix, but this is the ending that needs to happen. And I love that part. It's almost like the reason I write, because it's personally very satisfying.
I love that. And you did such a great job with that. Talk about, I love that part. Dead Drop by MP Woodward, which is out right now. And you can grab it in about 10 minutes when the show is over, unless you happen to win it. But let's take a couple of questions from the audience before we do that. Sherry, hey, Sherry, how did you celebrate the publication of this book?
One of the things that I got pushed to do, and I'm actually kind of a shy person, so I don't love doing this, but they said, oh, you have to have a launch day event at a bookstore. So I live in Seattle, and the University of Washington bookstore was the host that the publisher lined up. And Boyd Morrison, if you know that author, really strong author, he was my co-host and did a thing like this where we did questions, and I was encouraged to invite everybody I knew and so on and so forth. But we had such a good turnout. I had more than 60 people show up, and then we rented out this outdoor area of the Mexican restaurant that's on the water. University of Washington's on the water, so on Puget Sound, so it's just beautiful. And it was May 23rd. It was the day of publication, and so it was just a heck of a party, and honestly, a very memorable night in my life.
Oh, that's nice. That sounds great. Yes, I love Boyd. He's great. And that sounds like beautiful Mexican food on the water in a new book. Can't do better than that. Brenda says, have any of your books been optioned for the screen?
That's no, not officially. But one of the things that happens is you get at least I've had a lot. You do a lot of talking, and you do a lot of calls, like of Zoom calls like this with producers and directors that get all excited. So my agent has a counterpart with CAA, and so the books to screen people, and so you let's hope that happens in the future, because I would certainly love to see it on screen.
I would too, but I think don't you write the books to be a book, right? You write the
Absolutely right, and that's what a couple of producers said to me, that they feel like they get pitched all the time on stories that were written to be movies, and so one guy said to me, "You are a novelist," right? And I took that as a great compliment, and I think he was delving into the relationship things that we were talking about earlier, and that's really important to me.
Well, that's what makes the book work so well, and that's what would make a movie work as well too. But I'm happy with the book. I'm happy with the book. Sherry is asking, what books do you like to read?
Interestingly, I don't know if you found this, Hank, but I am careful about reading fiction when I'm writing fiction, because you can come off accidentally imitating it. Like you just kind of pick up another author's voice, and then you ruin your own. And so when I'm writing, I read a lot of nonfiction, to be honest, and that can be either related to research that I need for the book, or it can be history. And I think recently the books that are like really strong journalism, like Eric Larson books, right? The Splendid and the Vile, they are so utterly readable that I find them very entertaining, even though they're nonfiction. Fiction-wise, I have certainly read widely in this genre. Grew up with that. John le Carré is probably one of the authors I like more than the others.
Yeah, that's great. The Eric Larson books are amazing. Just unpredictable.
And they're so, and very much like we were talking about, they do connect small personal details to these big historic events, and so you feel like you are learning history without learning history. Yeah.
And you do the same thing, though. You make the reader feel very smart when you read your novels. Brenda Gaskell is asking, are you any relation to Bob Woodward of Watergate fame? How often do you get that question, and are you?
I get it a lot. I'm not a relation, but if anybody knows him, I'd love a blurb.
That would be great. That would be great. I worked in Washington during Watergate. And went to the Watergate hearings and covered the CIA hearings. But I still don't think I could email Bob Woodward, but I would if I could. I totally would.
Well, work on it. Maybe yes. He's watching.
Oh, yes. He's a big Crime Time fan in his spare time. I know he is, especially with what's going on right now. Do we have time for one more question? Will there be another book in the series, asks Renee. Hey, Renee.
Yes. Hi, Renee. Yes. I wrote the third book in the series. I finished it about a month ago. It's a little bit before it's due, so I may end up changing a thing here and there. But that should be out next summer. And then I've also completed a standalone book, which are a different set of characters and a different geopolitical problem, but very much trying to do the same thing of relating family dynamic, interpersonal family dynamics back to a world-changing event.
Oh, I cannot wait to read this. Can you tell us any titles?
Well, I can tell you my proposed titles. The third Handler book I want to call Fade to Black. We'll see if that survives. The other book I'm probably not comfortable sharing yet.
All right. Well, you let us know as soon as you can tell us, right? We cannot wait to read this. Let's spin the wheel of fun now and see who is going to win a copy of Dead Drop. Here we go. I always think there should be music. I really do. And the winner is, I told you, I was telling Mike earlier that sometimes when we spin it, we win. And I am not giving away this book. I already have this book. My husband is reading it too as well. So let's spin one more time and get a real person. Let's spin one more time and get a real person to win. Can we do that? Karen in the back room? Spin the wheel of fun one more time. Oh, I see technical difficulties happening in the back room. Okay, I'm going to spin the chat and it lands on Renee Herskowitz. It lands on Renee Herskowitz. I just spun it with my little cursor. So Renee, you are the lucky winner of Dead Drop by MP Woodward, you lucky woman. And just send me your email and we will get you a copy of this book. Before you go, let me tell you to stick around because at 4:00, we have another primetime show. And today we have the adorable, the fabulous, the brilliant Hannah Mary McKinnon with a very different kind of book, The Revenge List. If you have not read this, I cannot wait to tell you all about it. It's about an anger management class gone very, very wrong. And you all know Hannah Mary McKinnon, and she will be here with me in about 15 minutes. But let me say then, thank you, Mike, for being with us today. I hope you had fun.
Oh, so much fun. It's been a real pleasure, Hank. Thank you.
My complete pleasure. And let us know when the new books come out. We would love to have you back
You
to
bet.
talk about that. All right, you all. So just go get a cup of coffee, get a cup of tea, get whatever you want. Come back in 15 minutes for Hannah Mary McKinnon. If you can't make it, that's fine. We will miss you. But next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, look who we have. Megan Abbott. Oh my golly. Megan Abbott is such a genius. And her new book, Where the Woman is About to Be a Major Motion Picture or Netflix or something fantastic like that. I don't know. She's awesome. Come talk to Megan Abbott next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. As for today, you have your Father's Day gift now. You all Dead Drop by Mike Woodward. Run, and get that book. And until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book. And I'll see you next time.